What is up, Bad Brood? Eric here with Team Badman. Welcome you guys back to another edition of Bad Builds, where we take a look at some of the decks that we have been working on here at Team Badman to give you guys an idea of what we've been working on, of course, but also to give you guys some ideas for some of your own decks and hopefully help you consider some cards that you guys hadn't considered before. And today we're looking at a deck that doesn't really fit into the current metagame. It's a very fun option nonetheless. And the reason I say that is if you've looked at the post-perfection meta, things have changed a lot from how it used to be. It used to be a very, very slow, very kind of control-oriented meta when you had a lot of the Krillins and a lot of the Piccolos around. And then Android 20 came in, and he was super, super popular and played a very control-oriented kind of game. And then, of course, you had Roshi and you had Yamcha, and they liked playing slightly slower kind of games. And that was all the way up until the Perfection meta. It was very control-oriented. That was the popular deck. But also with Perfection came Cell, and Cell had fast leveling options in Cell's draining attack, as well as styled options they had available, like Namekian Leaping Kick, which is very, very popular in Namekian Restored Cell. In Saiyan Empowered, he had Saiyan Rage, which was basically an immediate level for him. And there were just a lot of options that really helped him facilitate that kind of faster game, getting up to the 3 and the 4, and abusing that for days. Then in the Vengeance meta, we not only saw the release of Unleashed, which we already know all about, but the new big 3, which is Brawly, Cooler, and Android 13, and all of them did something very, very fast. Android 13 had the very rapid anger, especially in Red Enraged and Black Devious, which were very popular choices. Brawly was almost never seen without either the Saiyan Empowered Mastery or Unleashed, so he wanted to level really fast as well. And Cooler had one of the best 2 anger cards in the game in Cooler Supernova, and since he was popular in Red Enraged anyway, if it hit, that was 3 anger. He had a very, very quick ability to level, get to the point where he wanted to go, and everything was just peachy. And now that we're looking at the Awakening meta, it's gotten even faster still. You look at an MP like Trunks, and his new level 1 is basically non-existent in games because of how quickly he levels off of it. You've got MPs like Gohan, who has a built-in name card that levels him up if it hits. Of course, you have MPs that can use Unleashed. You've got Vegeta, and you've got Goku, and you've got Cell. You have all these decks that are going just so fast that control decks have almost died off. Like, they're not fun to play. The slower game doesn't really fit. But we don't care here. We really don't care because we just like building fun decks, and today's deck is no exception. So we're going to rewind a little bit and go back to the Chicago Regional this year when I played a deck that I should have had more practice with but was still a very promising deck at the time, Black Devious Android 20. Camping on level 1, slowly dismantling an opponent's deck, playing a very control-oriented game. It's a really, really solid deck. And yeah, I made mistakes that day. I ended up going 4-4. Not great, but it was a very, very fun deck to play, and I figure, why not bring it back for the Awakening meta? There are new options to work with. He's got a new mastery, which isn't as good as Devious, but still gives him a little bit of flexibility. And with the return of Smoothness, the deck can still return to its former glory. So that's what we're taking a look at today. We are taking a look at Black Conflict Android 20. We're going a little more the control-oriented route. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So before I even start with any of the card options in here, any of the drills, any of the attacks, anything like that, we have a one-off here, and you'll start to see it as a little bit of a theme in some of these decks, especially in Black. And that is a one-off Dragon Ball of Earth Dragon Ball 7. We like ending combat. Black excels at this. It's got Black Power Up to help you do that, and then of course access to Blinding Energy move. Certain MPs have the ability to reuse and re-abuse Black Power Up, or they've got other ways to end combat. And Earth Dragon Ball 7 is another tool to help us do that, so we like having that in here. Sometimes you're just in a bad combat, you drew a bum hand, nothing's working out in your favor. So Earth Dragon Ball 7 is your one-off out for it. And it works really well with some of the rest of this deck. It helps you get a little more stability, helps you gain some of those stages, maybe kind of rectify your position a little bit. So we like having that in here. I like running this in a lot of decks because that's just a great option. Ending combat is awesome, just awesome. So of course we're going to have that in here. And after that, we need to talk drills. Android 20 likes them. He likes freestyle drills a lot. He pulls them out. They're all good for him, and there are a lot of them in this deck. And at the same time, there's one set of completely styled drills, so yeah, he can't pull them out, but it's too good to not have in here. And that's 3 copies of Black Smoothness drill. It's nice to say that card is back. It honestly is. It's one of Black's best card, probably Black's best card, and I'm still saying it's the best card in the entire game right now. Free +1 hand advantage, just amazing. Endurance built in, amazing. Back to 3, amazing. It's a huge part of what Black needed to kind of get its motor running again. Being limited to 1 copy in every deck during the OP season meant it didn't see a whole lot of play, especially considering the lot of Black decks were trying to level as well. You saw a lot of the cooler decks and 13 decks and decks that ran Unleashed, so they weren't going to run it. But now that it's back to 3 and we have the loss of the Devious Mastery, it's kind of important, and since this is a deck that camps on 1 and just, kind of lays stable, this is the perfect card for that. Absolutely huge deal. And of course, all the rest are non-style drills, so we're going to start off with 3 copies of one of Android 20's name cards, Android 20's Scouting Drill. This is very important for him because it's a big part of what he does, especially considering the energy heavy meta is starting to return. You're seeing a lot of those attacks come back out. You're seeing MPs that are very focused around heavy energy attacks. You've got Gohan come back into it. You've got Vegeta going into it. You've got all these other MPs that do that. And Android 20 has a really solid way to get around them with this card. Sure, it's not perfect. You're not going to get around cards like Vegeta's Galagun or Orange Fierce Attack or all these other options, but the ability to prevent damage nonetheless is a big deal, and it's part of what Android 20 does. It's usually one of the first drills you pull, so that's pretty important right there. Next is 3 copies of another quintessential drill, Acquisition Drill. This is a huge part of how Android 20 doesn't lose to Speed Anger decks. Yeah, it does take a little while to set up. You kind of got to get lucky on your draws to get it really rolling early game. But once you have acquisition drills on the board, it's really easy to prevent your opponent from even leveling at all. Once you got all 3 on the board, since they interact with one another, and they do count towards each individual drill's count, you can get a maximum of 6 anger lowering in a combat, which is great because Black is not very good at that. It doesn't have a whole lot of anger lowering cards built in. You gotta rely on some of those crits to do it, and it's still really hard to do in this deck, even with the reduction of the crit threshold to 4. So Acquisition Drill helps you do that, but its key here is anger lowering, and that's exactly why it's here. So next is 2 copies of Android Attack Drill. With the loss of the Devious Mastery, buffs are gone, and that sucks. Yeah, we got the crit reduction. I will continue to mention that, but since a lot of the attacks in this deck do deal just 4 life cards of damage and they just barely break the crit threshold, all it takes is 1 spot of endurance and crits are gone. So you want to have a little bit of an extra damage buff in there, especially considering there aren't a ton of attacks in this deck. It's not liable to win by raw beatdown, but it's very possible, and this drill helps you do that. +2 life to all your attacks is a big deal, especially considering there are so many in here that do life card damage, so that's very important. Even just a jump from 4 life cards to 6 life cards can make all the difference over the course of the game, even with 1 attack. So you want to have Android Attack Drill in here, and that's fantastic. Sure, it does apply for opposing decks if they're also androids, but there's not really a whole lot of other androids out there right now, so this is usually strictly going to benefit you, and that's a big deal. And lastly, we have 1 copy of Lookout Drill. Mill is starting to come back. There are decks that like doing this. There have always been cards that like doing this, such as Orange Destruction, or Black Foreshadowing, or Blue Slash, and you want to shut those off. Lookout Drill is your way to do that. You only really need 1 because Mill isn't a massive thing right now, but you still want to be able to prevent it, especially considering there's an MP that's almost solely Mill oriented right now in Cell, as well as the return in popularity of Dr. Wheelo, and you don't want to get hit by those revivals or those histories or whatever it might be, so you want to be able to get around that. Plus, it fits in with Android 20's whole pulling out non-style drills thing, so it rounds out a perfectly solid drill package, and it's a big part of what makes Android 20 Android 20. Next up, we have the setups, and setups are a huge part of why Black's card pool is one of the best in the game. There is one notable exception here, and that is Black Declaration. There are no copies of Declaration to be found in here, which means we lose a bit of endurance, we lose some extra board control, but at the same time, it's not really needed right now. There isn't a sense of urgency for removing things on opposing boards because there isn't a lot of board right now. Outside of Roshi, you're not going to find a whole lot of decks that like to establish a bunch of drills and a bunch of seps and things like that. And most other kinds of cards, the allies and the Dragon Balls and whatnot, can be coped with accordingly. So we don't really need it in this deck. It's not a huge deal. But instead, we've got all of our other powerful options readily available, starting with 3 copies of Black Power-Up. We like stages. Stages are very good. This gives us stages. It's very good. This helps us end combat. Sometimes we don't want to be in combat. So it's all very good. Black Power-Up is one of Black's best setups, not even a question, and it's a huge part of this deck, especially when combined with Earth Dragon Ball 7 and the inevitable Blinding Energy move. So there are a lot of ways to end combat, a lot of ways to mess with the opponent. It's all fantastic. Next is 3 copies of Black's Searching Technique. This is a huge part of why this deck works the way it does. You want to dismantle your opponent's deck slowly, surgically, carefully. This card is that. This is your surgical knife to cut through your opponent's deck. Being able to selectively search your opponent's deck for any 2 cards and banish them out is monstrously powerful. Sure, you can target some of the bulk cards that are in there. Maybe you want to target some of their endurance with things like Orange PowerPoint or Saiyan Recovery or whatever is going to be big for that. But you also have the option to hit one-ofs there in the deck. You can hit Time's Warrior's Tool, or Blue Terror, or maybe the one-off Sphere, or Allies. A lot of those are really easy to hit and really easy to target. At the same time, it is another option in this deck to help get rid of Unleashed, or in Goku's case, cards like Goku's Kaioken. Lots of fast anger cards. Cards are going to be very important to an opponent's win con. And this card is just marvelous for that. Being able to pick whatever you want and just remove it. Absolutely amazing. It's an essential part, 3 of mandatory. Lastly, of course, 2 copies of Visiting the Past. We like getting cards out of the discard pile. They're very useful, especially particular ones in certain matchups, like maybe we don't like physicals, so we're going to reuse Black Defensive Burst. Maybe we know our opponent has a big energy attack, and we don't know what kind of blocks we have left. Oh, let's pull out one of our energy blocks. Big deal. Maybe we want to end combat again. Grab the Blinding Energy move. It's all cool. It's all great. Visiting the Past is pretty mandatory in just about any deck that's almost not raw speed anger. It's a very powerful card, and it's reasonably going to fit in here. So that's it for the setups, and next we go on to our events, of course. The downside here is none of our events are styled, so we get nothing from the mastery, we can get no discard benefit, but all of the events in here are in here for a very good reason. You'll totally see that. Starting with 3 copies of Stare Down. This deck, like I said, likes to pick apart your opponent's deck and prevent them from doing what they want to do. Stare Down helps them do that once they've drawn them into their hand. You want to prevent them from unleashing, or maybe you want to get rid of their energy blocks so you can throw some of your strong energy attacks, or whatever it's going to be. Stare Down helps you do that. 3 of, always important. Next is 2 copies of Enhanced Reflexes, and until today we have a Black Omni block. This is basically what we've got. Sure, it's great. It stops, either a physical or an energy attack. If it's named, does no damage, banishes it after use. Sure, you have to banish top card of your life deck to use it. That's okay. But we don't have a Black Omni block yet, and considering Black's stake and where it's at, I wouldn't be surprised if we get one soon. But until that day, this is what we've got. And with the popularity of a lot of named cards right now, it's great having this around to get rid of some of those. You get rid of the Trunks' Slams or the Trunks' Knee Bash. You get rid of Vegeta's Gallic Gun. You get rid of a lot of really popular cards that are out there, popular named offensive cards. This is great for that. It's not a perfect Black Omni block, but it's not what it's supposed to be either. Next is 2 copies of Villainous Energy Sphere. As much as we like being proactive in dismantling our opponent's decks and preventing their actions, we like to be reactive too. And spheres help you do that. Maybe you don't want them to look into your hand and get rid of a card. Maybe you don't want them to Unleashed or Times a Warrior's Tool or use whatever styled event that they've got. This helps you do that. It's pretty popular right now. It's always been popular, and it's a natural fit in this deck. Next up is a one-of copy of one of my favorite cards to include in this deck, and one of the most universally disliked ultra rares in the whole game, and that's Villainous Empowerment. Yes, I actually ran this at Chicago. Actually ran this in my old deck, and it's just funny to use because a lot of people forget what it even does. They're like, what does this do? What? Oh, I guess that's pretty good. Of course, Villainous Empowerment shuts off, setups and drills for everyone on the board, which does suck for Android 20 because he likes using his drills. He likes having those. So it does shut them off, but it lets you search out a styled drill from your deck and immediately place it into play, which all we have is Smoothness drill. So it gets it out right away. And since it's not affected at the end of combat, you still get to keep your extra card. A little extra endurance is nice, but this is mainly an option against some of those control decks. You've got the Roshis that come out, and you've got all these other decks that like board. This is mainly a Roshi answer, especially since we don't have Black Declaration. And it might be a little too cute for its own good, but a one-of never hurt anyone, and this is just an entertaining card to see drop. I actually like it in this deck, and if you haven't tried it, this is the deck to try it with. It seriously, seriously is. And lastly, one copy of Times a Warrior's Tool. We know all about it. Moving on. Next, we have our physical combat cards, and we actually have quite a few physical combat cards in here because they're all good. They do good stuff. So naturally, we have to start off with 3 copies of Black Defensive Burst, 4 life cards, hits your opponent can't use physicals. It's standard. We all know all about it. So that's it there. Next is 3 copies of Black Flashback. I've told you guys how much I love this card. This card is just fantastic. You get inside your opponent's hand, banish out a particular card just for dealing that damage there. So not only do you get hand insight, but you can almost guarantee that the attack will go through. You can really mess with your opponent. You can deal out sizable damage with this. It's very, very solid all around, and it's cool to guarantee that an attack will go through. So that's just awesome. 4 life cards, very solid. Throw out Android Attack Drill, and you're in the money. You're in the money with this. Next is 3 copies of Android 20's Domination. We know all about this card, and this is another part of how you can dismantle decks with this. Your opponent loses stages. Name a card and banish it. Place a card, a non-event card in your discard pile on top of your life deck at the end of combat. So that's all super, super cool. It helps you recycle some of the cards out of your discard pile. It's a trigger that's easy to miss. We all know how easy it is to miss, but the general nature of this card and its effectiveness is something you can't ignore. It's so good for Android 20, and combined with that Android Attack Drill, it's still doing considerable work. Just great. Absolutely great. Next is 3 copies of Android Armbreaker. Unleashed is a thing right now. Unleashed is a really, really big thing, and you want to prevent that. I did originally have another much stronger attack in here, but I realized there wasn't a whole lot of leveling tech or leveling prevention outside of spheres, so I decided to cut that and go with the Armbreaker instead. It gives extra endurance, which you'll notice there's not a lot of endurance in this deck, so it is a little bit frail. So this helps us out there a little bit. Plus, it prevents those unleashed from going through. Very, very important to have. So, it's really, really solid in here. Very, very solid. And lastly, 3 copies of Sinister Choke. Lots and lots of damage. Unpreventable work here. It messes with those board decks again, especially the Roshis and the Gohans and whatnot. So that's massively, massively important. 5 life cards damage means a guaranteed crit. Throw on that Android Attack Drill at 7 life cards. Lots and lots of damage. It's been a little bit overlooked right now, unless you're Vegeta. So I do like including it in decks. It's very strong, very solid. It's earned its stake, and it fits in here very, very well. Following that, of course, is our physical blocks. You kind of need those. Those are really, really important. And of course, in here we've got plenty of ones for very, very, very reasonable utility for the deck. We have 3 copies of Black Finger Block. Okay, maybe I exaggerated a little bit when I said there wasn't really anything else that gains stages in this deck. This does that. This helps you get those stages back. It's got some endurance to it. Plenty solid. It's a very strong black block. As is the nature with blocks in the style. They're just really strong, and this is no exception. After that is 2 copies of Black Upward Dodge, which is very popular a while back, about set 3, set 4 meta, and that kind of fell off in favor of other options. But this is another card that helps you push out some damage when you really need it. This, that's really strong. +4 life to your next attack. Fantastic, especially considering there are a lot of life card damage cards in this deck. Actually, all of the attacks are life card damage, so you're going to deal a ton of damage if one of these attacks hits. Big deal. It's nice to have. It really is. It doesn't have the endurance of some of the other physical blocks. It doesn't quite have the utility, but it makes up for it with raw power capability, and that's something that's nice in this deck because it's not really all about the beats, and this helps it surprise an opponent and change it up just a little bit. So that's all awesome. And lastly, we need to have our energy combat cards. There aren't a whole lot in this deck, as I'm sure you could already tell, but they're in here for utility, here for a reason. The only styled energy attack we have is 3 copies of Black Swirl. This is great in combination with Android 20's level 1 power, or cards like Stare Down or Black Flashback. You get to specifically pinpoint cards in your opponent's hand. Make sure they're completely useless. Make sure that you hit. 4 life cards of solid damage. You don't care about the anger on hit because it's whatever. You're not trying to level. It's just a nifty side effect. Being able to snipe cards out of your opponent's hand is a huge deal, and it can win you games. This card can seriously win you games. And our other energy attack, 2 copies of Blinding Energy Move. I already talked about it. You want to get out of combat sometimes, deal out some damage while you're doing so. Blinding Energy Move helps you do that. It's very common in a lot of decks nowadays, and this deck is absolutely no exception. So that's a total of 6 combat enders in the deck, and that's plenty effective. That's more than just about any other deck that you'll really see out there is going to carry, unless it's a dedicated combat ender deck like Yamcha or Android 18. And they're not quite as effective at doing what Android 20 wants to do. So these are just here for convenience, but they're very effective convenience nonetheless. Of course, we need to have blocks. The advantage of these blocks is they all have endurance, which is great. It helps us buff up the last minute a lot of the endurance that we're kind of lacking throughout the rest of the deck. And it's not going to replace it all, but it's effective to have nonetheless. We have 3 copies of Black Swipe. We like banishing cards out in this deck. I'm sure you've already realized that. It's a little bit harder to do in the discard pile than it is out of life deck with a lot of the cards we've got. So Swipe is going to help us do that. Banish 3 out of your opponent's discard pile, 2 endurance, fantastic. And 2 copies of Black Flinch. This is the styled counterpart to Black Upward Dodge. Your next style attack deals +4 life cards of damage. This one has 2 endurance as well, which is just absolutely amazing. When you're starting to throw out defensive bursts or flashbacks, for 8 life cards, that's pretty cool. That's really nice to see your opponent's reaction being like, how much is that going to do? You can swing for tons of damage with this. It's just awesome, and it fits perfectly alongside Upward Dodge. You can deal tons of damage, and it helps give a little bit more oomph to a deck that could really use it. So this is definitely not a deck for the current meta, and it's not a deck for everyone. It likes playing the slow game, likes playing the control-oriented game, and that's not what we're looking at in the current meta game. It's got a lot of caveats to it as well. It doesn't have a ton of endurance, especially for a black deck, so it's kind of frail in that regard. It's really easy to have stretches where you won't see any endurance at all, or endurance will end up being the last card that you turn, and it's going to be one of your dominations, or a smoothness drill, or one of your useful endurance cards. It's going to end up being one of those cases. You do have the chance to dead draw a lot in this deck. You've got so many drills in here that's very possible you'll end up drawing into them. And that sucks, especially considering there's so many non-styles in here you can't pitch them to the mastery. You don't have the flexibility of recycling your hand like that. So it's not great in that regard. It's not at all a deck for everyone. But if you like the control game, the slower methodical game, and if you like, putting on your face mask and feeling like Surgeon, getting out your scalpel and just cutting away at your opponent's deck and doing so in a slow and comfortable way, this is the deck to try out for you. It might not be as effective as it used to be with the Devious Mastery, but then again, no black deck is going to be. This is still a really fun option. Helps you try out the Conflict Mastery. You know what? No, I don't even like that word. I feel like I use the word fun for just about every deck that we have put out here. This is, what's a good way to put it? This is a potentially high-level deck that pulls no punches. It doesn't like to mess around. It has one particular thing it likes to do, and it knows how to do it. It's not trying to be cute. It's not trying to be funny. It's a deck that goes for the jugular. And it's not in the same way as Brawly. It's not in the same way as Gohan. It's not like that. This is the horror movie kind of deck. This is a deck where you just watch at what it's doing. You're like, that's horrifying, but I can't do anything about it because it's doing exactly what it wants to do. And that's Android 20 in a nutshell. He does what he wants to do. It's kind of gross, kind of morbid, but he knows what he wants. That's exactly how we're going to do it. So that's what this deck is all about. It's a very strong deck in the right hands, but it's not for this meta. If you want to try something slower, it's still worth trying out. And I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to click that like button down below. I'd love to see your thumbs. Give me those upvotes. I would be super, super stoked to see them. If not, click the dislike button and let me know what you guys didn't like so that way I can change it for future episodes. I'm totally serious, guys. I'm totally willing to change it. Just let me know. Seriously, just let me know. Also, if you guys haven't hit the subscribe button down below, please be sure to do so that you can follow this series and all of our other series we've got going on. This is Wildcat Week here at Team Badman, so we do have another match with Ryan Lambden, the UFC Wildcat, going up tomorrow, and we will have a third one on Friday, so all of that is fantastic. Be sure to check all of that out, as well as all the future stuff that we have planned throughout this month and into the new year. And lastly, if you haven't found us on social media, all those links are down below too, so you guys can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Libsyn, so be sure to check all of those out. Go listen to our latest podcast, which went up yesterday, and just come say hey. We'd love to interact with you guys. So that's going to do it for this episode. I'm Eric from Team Badman, signing out. So thank you guys for watching. And like always, stay bad. We'll see you guys next time. Catch you later.